to the first ever HLTV award show, coming at you live from the beautiful city of Copenhagen in Denmark. Now, we all know that 2021 has been a historic year for Counter-Strike. We finally got to see the long-awaited return of LAN events back to our arenas. We did over 780 days to the next installment of the Major, where we got to see a brand new victor lifting the trophy. And of course, now it's time to celebrate all the greatness that went down in 2021. Over the next hour and a half, we're going to be crowning our highlight play of the year, our top team of the year, and what you guys at home have all been waiting for, counting down the top 3 players of 2021. But I'm not alone in this gorgeous studio. In fact, this studio keeps on expanding. We're going to move over to the couch area, where we do have the brains behind this machine that is the award show. We've got SPUNJ, Striker, and Prof. Gentlemen, I know this has been a kind of a long-awaited event that you wanted to put on. So how does it feel to finally be here?
Amazing, actually amazing, especially after all of the intense work over the last month or so. But of course, this is not an idea that we just came up with now. It's been something that's been talked about for some time, and yeah, we're starting small, let's say, for this year, and then hopefully it'll be something that we return to every year, right?
Yeah, it's pretty good, right? I think here the idea with this, if we can expand in the future, bring some players in, get maybe a live audience when the world allows it, turn it into a bit of an event, right? That people want to tune in for every year, and this could be a good start right here. Hopefully we don't mess it up, but it's a good thing we brought you, right? This is the usual circus, and they actually normally let me be in charge of this. But we need someone who can actually all put us in line, especially Striker. He's a bit of a troublemaker. I don't know how much people are tuning into the podcast here, but this is good. Quick whirlwind trip, couple of nice meals, and hand out some awards. So tonight should be fun.
Yeah, I do feel like I'm intruding on a very glamorous episode of the HLTV.
Well, we're all dressed up in some degree.
Pretty much the idea, yeah. It's kind of like a propped up episode of HLTV Confirmed where we actually get to announce some stuff.
Exactly.
We also started on time, which is impossible with Lucas. Shout out to our great our producer.
He's here too.
He is. He's helping out a bit.
I don't think he's making no cameos from Lucas tonight.
Maybe he's got a surprise in store.
Oh yeah, we don't want to. Yeah, well, there's something to look forward to at the end of the show, right? We're going to be debuting a bit of a frag movie. Yeah. So that's going to be exciting. Maybe he'll make his appearance then and there. But yeah, look, it's been, like I said, it's been a long year. We're in a new year, right? But last year, you think about all the different Counter-Strike that we went through, right? All the different things that happened within that year. A lot went down, and a lot that I don't really remember too specifically, right? Because so many different things transpired in 2021 for Counter-Strike. The return of LAN, that has to be the big one, right? Because everyone at home has experienced this weird global situation. Yep. But getting back to that for Counter-Strike, that's the return to what we all want to see. So hopefully we can get a bit more of that this year, right? Yeah,
fingers crossed. Let's roll it on back, because I do think we should be recapping what happened in 2021, because as you were saying, SPUNJ, a lot going on. Let's start off with the Q1, just to give you guys a recap of what exactly went down there, because it was a hell of a long time ago. We started things off, obviously, you can see Get Right on your screens there, unfortunately retiring from the profession, but still was the trophy bearer coming out in Stockholm.
Likes to say that he didn't retire, he just stepped away from competition indefinitely, and is now a streamer for now, but we never know what's going to happen. 2-time #1 in CSGO the first 2 years, the best player in the world with NiKo building that era and everything. So a great player, just like a great representative of CS.
Do you boys even remember this, right? Because this was like the meant to be the end of the previous year, right? And we kicked off the year with was it the global final or the world final?
Global final.
Okay.
At that point.
So I get the names wrong all the time here, but to kick the year off with a global final, right? It's one way out of the break coming into this event right here. And I think it's kind of good to see the year start with Na'Vi winning an event, considering how we know how the year transpired, right? Astralis, well, the big question is, we didn't realize this may have been one of the last times we ever see this version of the team as well in a final, right? Like that's pretty crazy when you think about it.
Was that actually that happened, right? That was the last final of the legendary.
I think so.
That was the only final that they actually played in the entire year.
Yeah, and then the whole device situation happened, right? So that's crazy to see. And then this happened, CIS, Counter-Strike. I remember us talking about it, Striker, on the podcast, right? We were ranking all the CIS teams, but it was wild to see Katowice, Gambit especially, right? This is where they were like, oh, okay, Gambit are here to play. They're on nobody's radar coming into the year, right?
Yeah, I mean, everybody saw Gambit Youngsters and this being the team that could, make it from the top 30 and just slowly climb through the ranks. And then they go from maybe a borderline top 20 team who just wins some of these smaller events, boom, winning Katowice, immediately, just out of nowhere. So yeah, I didn't see that coming.
Unlikely final too, right? Like having VP in there as well, that kind of meant that they were back. I think there like obviously a lot of the storyline behind Sanji's gone as well. That's a bit sad. But obviously there was like a lot of talk about all the CIS
He's
teams.
still alive. We don't have to talk about him that way. Right?
He's still out there cracking. The one that disappointed me obviously throughout the year was Spirit, but that was a little bit later in the year, right? They still put up a decent showing of this, but to have Gambit, right?
Yeah, this is kind of the start of the CIS era, right?
Yeah.
4 of the 6 teams in the playoffs of Katowice, which was one of the elite events for our top 20, like the highest tier of events in how we rank the results and everything. To have 4 CIS teams, that was the start of the CIS era and a big discussion point throughout the whole year.
Yeah, it definitely was. This highlight, I'm sure we're going to be talking about this a lot later on, but Chad, you actually had the pleasure of casting this alongside Alex. It must be crazy.
Silly. Yeah, it was kind of silly, right? Because I know Peter, he was keeping track of Alex and I casting throughout the season, and he noted that we were doing this gag, like of talking about how an impossible round, right? And the fact that Cadian pulls off this round here, right? Like, throw all the context you wanted it. The round itself is still crazy. And I don't think Alex and I were believing it was going to happen. I don't think we were believing it was going to happen at all. And then it's wild. Like, and this was so early in the year that this happened. It doesn't feel like it happened so early in the year.
No, yeah. When I was thinking that was Q1, I was like, really? That? Like.
I love the celebration.
Yeah.
Is this the one where the manager's knee gets
No, that's
gets
a different.
knocked, or is
That's
that a different one?
Is that a refreshment?
No, I think
Oh, actually, that is a fresh one.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Maybe some bitter news to
Yeah.
end Q1 on. Unfortunately, the Colossus, no more, has fallen.
Well, I thought we were going to talk about Floppy to Valorant, but if we're going to talk about Cloud9, then I guess we should mention Cloud9.
Yeah.
A little jab to Floppy. I'm going to refer to him as a Valorant player for the rest of his career. Whenever we're talking about Floppy from now on.
Just him, not the rest of them that came back in the meanwhile?
Actually, you're right. Maybe I need to start like a group of them.
Yeah.
But he's back and he's fragging, so that's right. But the Cloud9, the Colossus, that's. I think there was so much hype behind that roster, right? And look, Henry's out there being a showman, trying to give everybody something to do, and everybody just kind of went a little bit nuts with that. But I don't know, it feels like they pulled the plug on that a little bit early, right? Because they were just
100%.
starting to get some traction going.
Yeah, I mean, who knows how much the pandemic's had to do with it. And I mean, obviously Cloud9 said that's as one of the reasons why they pulled the plug. They couldn't have the team in North America, but obviously the results had to play into it. And it's not like they had terrible results, but considering the hype, and I mean, in comparison, it just didn't really compute, you know? Like everybody was obviously talking about the big fucking, sorry about dropping the F-bomb already. I don't know why I'm even apologizing, because we kind of like used the F-bomb pretty much like 24/7 on Confirmed, and this is pretty much the same thing. So
It's just
anyway.
one word we've banned this season.
Yeah, exactly. There's just one of the
one
we
that
can't
I
say.
say too much.
Anyway, what was I saying? Colossus. Yeah, everybody was talking about the big salaries, right? Especially Esetagan, obviously, with his progression throughout the year and all of this. So that got so much traction that even though the team didn't necessarily have terrible results, people just expected so much more based out of that. So I think that's where the downfall was.
Yeah, then with the whole Woxic situation is part of that Cloud9 story as well.
Can't even remember that he was ever there almost. That's
wild.
Yeah.
But what do we think when we reflect on that first quarter of the year, right? Like the highlight for me is the CIS revolution, right? It's the fact that they've all come out here to play, and then how that filtered into the rest of the year, right? It's great that we already know how the year pans out, but that right there was the biggest talking point, especially around Katowice and everything. And I think we saw what the year held, because we're going to talk about the team of the year later, but I think we know which region. We know which, we had a couple years ago when EG and Liquid were both good. I wouldn't say it was North America's year, but it was North America at their strongest of all time. I think CIS 2021 is the year of the CIS teams, right? And even a lot of the players that we find ourselves talking about, right? The Monacies of the world, Deco, wonderful. If people tune into the show, we're saying these kids' names who probably a lot of these people have never seen play before all the time. So not only did they have rookies come out of nowhere, Bit's another example, but they also had so many strong teams.
I mean, in terms of the top 20 this year, also, I'm not sure about the exact number. It also depends on how you look at some players like Yakindar. Is he an EU player or a CIS player? But essentially, the number of EU players and CIS players in the top 20 is either the same or somewhere there, right? That's never been the case in terms of like in that amount, having that many CIS players in the top 20.
Wasn't there something crazy with the events having MVPs all being from the CIS region?
I think there was like
obviously
I
ZywOo
think
got
in
it
total.
Winter, and then
there's Frozen from Flashpoint as well. That was like a different one.
Yeah.
There were not many devices from IM Fall.
Yeah. But they couldn't.
Yeah,
no
no,
CIS
regional,
teams
right?
could compete in that.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's
I think ZywOo and at the end of the year. So, but essentially throughout the whole year until October, I think all of the MVPs were won by CIS players, if there were CIS players there, except Fang, I think, early on in the year.
Fang, yeah.
So it wasn't, and no European player almost won MVP. So
I like that you mentioned about obviously Bit there as well, because something that we didn't actually touch on in the video, but just 6-man rosters. You know, at that period of time, it still was a thing. Obviously, we'll see later on. Yeah, because I think that came in Q2, which we can take a look at now. Obviously, the 6-man rosters kind of declining in terms of Valve's ruling as well. So yeah, let's move on to Q2 and just see what was happening there. Because obviously, the big showing was Device. Moving over to NIP, probably one of the most expensive signings that we've ever seen in Counter-Strike.
Our record-breaking show. I think we broke that record already now. But yeah, that was so massive. Remember just having a chill beer in the sun and just having the calls like, come home.
To be fair, right, the Device
Shit
one
is going down.
the Device one is one that actually caught all of us off guard. Like if people were keeping up with the roster mania of what's just happened recently, we could tell most of these changes that were going to happen. The Device one, nobody saw coming. Nobody saw coming. This one here is important, right? DreamHack Masters, I was going to give a city there. It was online. First of all, Train, something that I'm sure a lot of you at home are missing, but Na'Vi winning that really comes into play with the Intel Grand Slam.
And that is also the first event where they put in Bit as a full-time member, right? So straight off the bat, winning, right?
Look, we showed Ancient there as well, and I know a lot of people didn't love that map. I do love that map. People are slowly warming up to it. But look, I think that it's obviously getting more playtime. No, it didn't get playtime in Blast events, did it?
Not really. No.
I mean, well,
at the major, obviously G2 picking that was very much a surprise.
Yeah, in the final,
and then the full finals. I mean, once I think it got played. People really weren't liking it very much.
I think the social from Blast was like saying that Vertigo and Ancient weren't getting played a lot at all then. So it was interesting to see. I thought it was going to get integrated quicker, but I guess at this portion of the year, we were all set up to go, okay, Gambit are really good. Are Gambit going to be good when we get to LAN, right? That was the big conversation about that time. And then going into Cologne, which is what we got right here, we didn't get it in the arena. Right?
No.
It's a little bit sad.
Not yet.
But we got the LAN event, right? This was the first LAN event back during COVID.
Yeah.
Like, this is a huge deal, even though it was a hotel LAN, right? Even though you have to consider those circumstances there. This event here showed that we could start returning, right? That the world can go back to normal. So I think this here, look, it's a little bit romantic, right? But like the healing of Counter-Strike, getting back to the pure...
Nature's healing.
Yeah, right? No, but it is in a way that we can get back to that. And Na'Vi to beat G2 again. Then we had the storyline of Katowice 2020, right? And then the back-to-back lands. And
this is kind of also where it started in 2021, the G2 Na'Vi, you know, because obviously we then had the major after that we're going to get to. So that was also kind of like the continuation of the rivalry that kind of had passed for quite a long time before that.
And that's the thing you talk about when you were saying about the online teams having to show up at LAN. The top four that we saw at that event, FaZe, Astralis, G2, Na'Vi. None of the sort of onliners that we saw of that era. And that was a really interesting conversation to spark. You know, can those onliners, I guess as we're branding them, kind of show up on LANs as well?
Yeah.
That was a talking point of the year, right? Because it was a big talking point in 2020 because it was all online. And then we were talking about going into LAN Light, and then from LAN Light going into maybe smaller venue LANs, and then going back into arena LANs. Right now, it didn't necessarily follow that trajectory, but I think one of the keys at that point was, and maybe it was undervalued a little bit at the time, because Gambit, you know, they still made it to the playoffs, right? But we're thinking, well, it's not the Gambit that we see online that don't make a single mistake and all this. And I think people had the expectation that they'd come in and win the LAN. They don't put the experience of LAN very highly, right? And we have a lot of new viewers over the last couple of years as well. Maybe they're not too familiar with that, but then you look at it, you go, okay, well, Na'Vi just add a bit, right? Like full time, and then they go through and they win it as well. So I think this is the part where we were all very hopeful, because we're going into summer and everything's going back, and we just had a LAN and everything's going to keep going smoothly. And I think
the Australian speaking.
Well, we got a slap in the face, didn't we? Because we didn't continue in that trajectory. But anyone have a highlight of that period?
I mean, I would kind of draw back to Cologne and talk about FaZe as a contrast to everything that you're talking about, because obviously they had been struggling for such a long time, and then suddenly Cologne comes and LAN buff, you know, that they kind of called it, and everybody kind of called it. And, you know, you can talk about how maybe that was a little bit overhyped because of obviously FaZe. That was kind of their only highlight of the year, the semifinals in Cologne, right? From that point, they kind of had some up and downs, but they never really made it that far again. But still, that was kind of a big contrast on, you know, like some of these staples of the game that just somehow made it, even though they had been struggling for such a long time. So I thought that was an interesting contrast of Cologne in particular.
I'm just trying to think what like the other big stuff. Like Ancient was a big one for me, right? Train going out, like
That was very controversial, I think, at the time as well, in terms of people that have an affiliation to train, myself included, in that camp as well. But I do like Ancient. I remember playing it back in, because it got released at the tail end of 2020, right? And it was just in those scrimmage maps. I remember playing it and being like, this is actually pretty decent as a map. It doesn't look like Counter-Strike for me, like aesthetically, but actually I think it plays pretty well in terms of some of the updates they've made as well.
Yeah.
It seems to be pretty good.
I'm not the biggest fan, right? Like, so for people who haven't tuned in and listened to me say it 150 times, what happened, like every time a new map got added like that, like me, Henry, Machine, Rush, and one of our little online friends, Jay, we would all jump in and we would geek out so hard. We did it with Vertigo. We saw every single change, like the door and then this and that, and we love it because it's new, right? And we're bad, so new stuff is good because we can have gimmicks.
The only way to win, right?
Right? And then Ancient came out and we were doing the same thing. And the map, like you said, it didn't play, like Vertigo needed a lot of changes. Ancient, we haven't seen anything too drastic just yet.
Yeah,
Temple,
it's the same map.
Yeah, but a lot of people don't know Temple didn't exist. In the original Ancient, Temple didn't exist, right? So a lot of things have like changed with that map, but I really like it because something for me that I think is undervalued by maybe the general public of Counter-Strike is the fact that a new map is great for the thinkers of the game, the in-game leaders, the coaches, the analysts, because it comes up with a new way to approach problems and a new way to approach a map. And that for me is a big part of Counter-Strike. Like it's one of the biggest parts of Counter-Strike. It's great if you have NiKo's aim, right? It's fantastic if you know the timings perfectly on Mirage and every single piece of utility. But to be creative in Counter-Strike, right? That's what I loved. That's what I really loved, like geeking out on that. So yeah, I'll sell my Ancient Spear.
I was expecting some Mirage slander to come in, but you just pulled back at the perfect timing. So like, I'm gonna check.
I do enough of that on Twitter.
Yeah.
I mean, to piggyback off that, like I think it's pretty telling that the first team that kind of, I guess people thought figured out Ancient was an IP with Threat.
Yes.
Who kind of like came up with a lot of the defaults, apparently, at least like that's kind of what we assume, right? And now he was talking about a lot of it too at the time. It's just like one of the biggest tactical minds of the game, you know,
Just
kind of trying
B.
to figure out. Yeah, but obviously like NIP were the team that a lot of people stole from in terms of defaults and stuff like that in the first couple of months. And that's where a lot of teams kind of got their base on the map, you know, and that's obviously coming from Threat.
Yeah.
Do you think we're going to see more of that this season, just like going into this year? Because as we were talking about, we didn't get a lot of it towards the tail end. Do you think now that they've had the break and teams can come out, do you think we're going to get more of that this year?
More of Ancient
More
in
Ancient?
general?
It's funny because I feel like initially it was used as a real, I don't want to use the word gimmick, but like people were picking it a lot.
Yeah,
Like it was
pick,
picked
yeah, for
a
sure.
hell of a lot compared to some of the other
Calling
maps that
people's
came in.
bluff.
Yeah, calling people's bluff. There you go. That's the phrase I wanted. And then you kind of see people go, actually, screw this. Like, I don't know what we're doing. At all. Like, why are we practicing on this map when, you know, we're not sure whether we're going to be using it going forward. So
I think a slight problem with that.
so.
Yeah, sorry. I think a slight problem with that is just nobody kind of got to figure it out, or at least nobody made it a staple for them, you know? Nobody really made it a home map.
Yeah.
Everybody had like very up and down results on it. There were very few teams who actually made pretty good results and had a lot of success. So I think that's why essentially like everybody went like, well, we can play it, but we're probably not going to unless we're kind of forced to, you know.
I think the NIP storyline going into the major when they were like the best Ancient team, and then just didn't pick Ancient, and then when they played it even against G2, right, they lost, and some other games, we just realized like, okay, we thought NIP was this amazing Ancient team, but it just they were winning, but they were winning closely, and in the end, it didn't really pan out as them being super dominant on the map, and it just became this, what Freya mentioned, just a map that's somewhere there where you would rather just pick something you're more comfortable with and where you can prepare more, whatever.
Well, you mentioned NIP. We are going to move on into Q3 because we did see a little flare of NIP greatness later on in the quarter. But we are going to start off with EPL because that was where we saw an absolutely incredible grand final going down. It was, of course, two Goliaths, two Titans going head-to-head, Simple and ZywOo. And this was an absolute slog of a grand final as well, completely back and forth. And it was good to see Vitality, you know, really putting it up to Na'Vi when they were kind of gearing up the most.
It was good to see a best of 5 that wasn't a 3-0. Now I know the best of 5s are a bit of a point for some people.
But this was actually exciting. Like most of it, some maps were a bit, you know, one-sided, but it was still like that back and forth, you know. It wasn't like a 3-0, like 2-0, then 2-1, 3-1, and it was like constantly back and forth. And even the last map was amazing. So it was one of the greatest best of 5.
I think it was Peter as well. I'll reference him again, who said like, or maybe he was referencing someone else. I get my references wrong. But when these two play against each other, and that's not Na'Vi and Vitality, that's Simple and ZywOo, it should be like a national holiday, right? Like that right there, you give an international holiday, a Counter-Strike international holiday, right? Because it's two of the absolute beasts. But we got to touch on this, right? The change that was going to completely ruin the game of Counter-Strike as we all know it didn't do a lot. So that nade change, I'm sure we can talk about that a little bit more in detail later. But yeah, that nade change and the M4 change at the same time, right?
Yeah, I mean, that was almost the more important one because it really changed the meta. Like, it made everything for a couple of months much more C-decided.
You can see it here. The silenced M4 is coming into play.
Yeah, it took like maybe a month for 95% of the players to switch, right?
Yeah, I was streaming a little bit at the time when the change happened, and someone came into my stream and they were like, "Oh, SPUNJ, like the new silenced M4, it's sick, right?" And I like play on 60, 70 ping in Malta. So when you spray with the M4, it's already slow. It feels super slow. And I was just like, nah, it's still trash, man. And then I started playing with it and seeing how much, and I was like, oh, that guy was right. I'm an idiot. I did the classic CSGO thing where we rule out all the weapons like we did with the AUG and the Krieg for so long and stuff. It's like, now, if you're using the M4A4, your name's probably Bit, right? Like, there's not too many players still using that. But
Navi was actually kind of like the only team that consistently didn't really use it for quite a long time until slowly. Yeah, I guess not, but didn't seem to matter to them, to be honest.
Well, this was the highlight for NOP that we were sort of alluding to. Yeah. IM4 kind of managing to come and win that, and then not really doing an awful lot else after.
Was it their only highlight?
Yeah, kind of.
We're so hard on NIP, guys. Come on.
They kind of tricked themselves and us all in one go, right? Like there was I think the expectations, especially for them going into Sweden, this is like the major that's happening on home soil and winning the last event and having this rise and like the device storyline not really working like from the beginning perfectly. Like the relationship was kind of tense maybe to start the cooperation, but then at that point seemed like everything's going well. Like device wins the MVP there, everything's like on course for them to have like a deep run, but then it doesn't really pan out. Right?
Yeah, it falls apart in a big way. In a big way there. I think when you look at the ENCE result now. Right, ENCE are a team who I wouldn't say they're like cemented as one that we're going to expect to win trophies, but they've also made the roster change recently with Madden that we've all seen, right? That right there, this ENCE team, I think showed what the Dihas, the Hades, like the combined, this team has a lot of skill. So I'm interested to see how much they can do this year, right? Because they've just added more skill. So that's
and more aggression too.
Yeah, and I like that, especially in a snappy team. He loves a good rush, old Snappy, right? I remember watching the Nuke games. He was just going super, super quick. But there wasn't too much going down in that quarter.
Yeah, well, there was a lot going down in Q4, which we're going to be moving on to now. Obviously, the major to be opening that one up as well. Finally, we get Counter-Strike back in an arena, back in front of a crowd. I mean, all of us were in attendance there, and that was absolutely incredible. Just feeling that atmosphere, soaking that up. That is exactly what Counter-Strike is all about.
Just seeing people's faces again, right? Yeah. It was nice. Like that's the feeling. It was nice to just see everybody again. It's like we'd all been kept apart for such a long period of time, and now we're all doing what what the majors are. It's meant to be a celebration of Counter-Strike, right? We not only crown the best team in the world at that time, it's also a celebration.
Yeah, but I mean, the return to an arena was obviously the big highlight of the PGL major. It's just, entering that arena and just seeing so many people all of a sudden, obviously, like once we got to the weekend, it was packed. It was full to the top, and that was just crazy to see, especially after a year and even more than a year and a half, basically 2 years, because even in Katowice 2020, we didn't have a crowd. That's basically the first event that got shut down because of COVID, right? Yeah. So for 2 years, we didn't really have arenas, and this was the return.
And perfect matches, perfect storylines. Like the playoff games were amazing, and for the final to have NiKo or Simple going to win a major final. Like, can you wish for anything? Like, these are the two players that everyone, I think every CS fan wants them to win a major at some point, right? They deserve, even though I hate that word, like they deserve it, right? With their play. And maybe you can talk about Guardian as someone that was also in that position a couple of times, and with Navi as well to win, but probably won't have that chance anymore. And at least, Navi win their first.
Blast after that. That's where we thought that the highs were never going to end, right? We went into another arena event, and then we quickly got brought back down to earth here. But this big change here, obviously, Astralis no longer being the legendary team, right? We all knew this was happening for such a long period of time, and we were talking about it so openly, right? But it is something that I think is like sad that we didn't get an ending for them on LAN. It was them just slowly disintegrating, which kind of sucked a bit there. But yeah, like the tail end of the year, it feels like everybody got a little bit of what they wanted. Gambit get the win on LAN at V4. It's not a huge event, but they get the LAN win. Vitality ramping up. We know it's the end for them. They get their LAN win, right? It felt like you know, maybe Na'Vi were throwing a couple of scraps their way by not attending some of these events. So
I think that's always the interesting story about IO and Winter was the fact that, obviously Vitality looked really convincing there, but we were coming into the World Finals after that and saying, how much stock can we take from that, from the other teams? Because Na'Vi just weren't there, plain and simple. And then they come into the World Finals and they do it very cleanly.
To be fair, they did lose to Liquid at first. And we're like, okay, is this an event that actually Na'Vi will not win? Because
they just wanted to repeat the Global Finals 2020. That's what they wanted. They wanted that lower bracket run, wanted to make it even more difficult, get more practice against teams. That's the Na'Vi way.
Well, I think
because they need practice, of course.
They were taking sympathy on Liquid, because Liquid not only were cop and flack from like all the pundits, they were cop and flack inside the team with those interviews. So I think that, that was nice of Na'Vi.
One of my favourite moments from the full finals was watching Liquid, when they were doing the rising stage and the players were coming out, watching 2 players from Liquid going one way and 3 going the other, and it was just like, that is actually just epitomising all of the issues we said within the team. Just, not on the same page, but sort of RIP Liquid.
It was kind of a silly season. I don't know if we ever had such a open, like everyone was super open, or not open, but leaks were out there, rumors.
The information was open.
The information was out there on so many teams that changes are happening, and we had this like 2 or 3 weeks last events of just like everyone's gonna fall apart, but they're still playing CS. And we had this amazing Vitality run, which is like a French team that is breaking apart, but actually playing together and playing well and playing maybe the best CS that they played the whole year. So it was kind of amazing to watch that, actually.
I think just going back to the finals of the World Final as well, the fact that we got to see Gambit taking on Na'Vi, CIS teams going head-to-head, I think that was literally the perfect match to be ending out the year on.
It closed the year, I think, with the 2 best teams, right? Like, and that's what we wanted to see. And I want to see more of that rivalry this year. Right? And we obviously had a lot of comments so far about the placings in the top 20 up until this point.
Yeah, maybe we should bring that up as well, because obviously we're going to be crowning our top 3 here of the HLTV player rankings for 2021. But let's take a look at exactly what we've got on the card so far, because we have had those top 17 players already crowned. So do you want to give us maybe a little bit of insight, maybe any highlights that you've had of the list so far, guys?
I mean, I guess if we want to start with kind of like the bottom to top from number 20, I think one of the first that people kind of caught on to were perhaps Rops, because that was also a name that was obviously high up there in the previous years. I think it was 7th in 2020, and obviously Mouse just didn't really compete much during the year.
So Flashpoint, right?
So obviously he just didn't really get to play in playoffs at all, because the team around him just didn't really work out. So I think that was a pretty big highlight from like some of the first names, because I think everybody else, of course, they could have made it, could not have made it. Like Brokey is a name that also on number 20. He finally made it last year. I think he was pretty close and kind of ended up missing out, and now he kind of got that nod. So that was also a kind of a big highlight from the start of the list anyway for me.
Yeah, I mean that is also the number 20 is like the hardest one to guess, and maybe to some degree sometimes the hardest one to decide, because you're kind of leaving someone out of that legacy of being a top 20 player. Like you can come close, like Pimp did in 2015, and just not have it. So now he can't use that combined with the history of playing with Glaive and in Liquid. That would be like the holy trinity, right? We couldn't stop him ever.
Did he ever beat Titan though?
I don't know about that one, especially not on Mirage. I don't think so, right? But yeah, he had a great year, but it's not on that level. It's not like in the history books, right? And making it in the top 20, even if it's number 20, it means something like historically.
I think like one of the things with this is, right, if I was to make a list of the top 20 players of the year, right, the thing is, it's such a difficult task to do, because there's so many different criteria in Counter-Strike. And if people pay attention to Twitter, you saw Nafany and Apex actually having some tweets about this the other day, where Nafany, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but the sentiment in the sense that we don't know what goes on inside the team, right? So in terms of how valuable a player actually is to a team, right, or their success, we have no way of measuring that.
Yeah.
We can only get the tangibles, right, the statistics that we value, right? And that's the hard part to do here. That's why like these later numbers, okay, so are you going to value like achievements more than like how well a player did with it, like, or was the rest of the team bad? Like we've had this before with NiKo many years ago, right, where he was just hard carry mode and stuff. So look, I would never want to make a list like this, and fortunately, I will never have to. But unfortunately, Striker, for you, right, you're going to be the man who's going to have to answer some hard questions here, because there's been some dramas. Sure. There's been some drama. Electronic at 7. Drama. You better bloody explain yourself.
Look, I mean, the way I would start with, I'm kind of piggybacking off what you just said about kind of achievements and how those are valued, right? Like they basically aren't valued. We're just looking at what we can see, right? That they performed in certain, like for example, performed in big matches. They got to play in those big matches and got to show their worth, right? And that kind of is important. And obviously, you're not going to get to the big matches if you don't have kind of a team around you. But like it's just what we can see that we can judge, right? That's kind of like the big point. And so it's also, there's a lot of factors that we can't even take into consideration and that obviously have an impact on a team, like a coach that we obviously doesn't have any sort of statistics for us to follow and for us to measure and to kind of figure out. So it's like, I'm not a fan of people going like, oh, but Navi won so many tournaments. Why do they only have a number 7? You know, why do they have number 1 and only number 7 while Gambit was the second best team? They have 3 people so close to the top 5, right? So I think this is like one of the factors that people don't really understand why we look at the ranking this way. It's just we can only look at what data we have, right? We can't take into consideration some of these subjective decisions, like, you know, how many like what got them to the title.
Sure.
Yeah.
There are a lot of other factors that just don't play into that, right?
I mean, even someone like James, like this is something that maybe some people also talk about, like, oh, he's an in-game leader, even though people don't talk about James as an in-game leader, he is, right? And BlameF as well was, at least for a good period of the year.
Yeah.
These are not things that we take into consideration, right? That is definitely, if we look at all of the in-game leaders, it is something that affects your performance on the average, but like how much?
Yeah.
In which case, how much, right?
Yeah.
In some teams, you are an in-game leader, but you call like 70% of the time. Sometimes someone needs to micromanage. It's different depending on the team, on the player. So it's just something that we can't take into consideration. That's it. So just leave it out.
Yeah, exactly. Like if we can't measure it, we can't really decide anything based on it, right? Like it would all have to be entirely subjective about like a lot of people say in-game leaders should be valued a little bit more, but then you don't know which calls they made. There's a lot of people that have like communication is just a big part of CS, right? And some in-game leaders are just very loose and they just take a lot of information from their teammates. So how do you value that?
What if someone is a good player but a bad in-game leader? So you just then like
drop him down?
No one else mentions that, right?
Are they baiting?
Yeah.
You know, like what are they doing?
Why are we talking about BlameF now?
Yeah. But no, like Hampus is like an entry fragging game leader, right?
Yeah.
So like you could, and he's he's.
I mean, he could be maybe an example of a player that is a good player, but maybe as an in-game leader isn't that good. So maybe even if he maybe should have gotten into some top 20 if you want to use that criteria, but then he shouldn't be, right? Because he has bad calls.
Sure.
That is just like a very complicated thing to go into.
Now, you've done a great job of not explaining why Electronic is number 7. So do you want to give us a chance, or do you want to explain to us? I'll give you another chance.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, obviously the big debate was whether Electronic deserved a higher spot over the Gambit couple, right? Over people, Ax1Le and Hobbit in particular.
Comparable riflers.
Exactly. Yep. Like a lot of people looked at the stats and saw like fairly similar stats, even though that necessarily wasn't the case when you look at only the tournaments that we considered. Obviously, Gambit played in a couple of tournaments that didn't really get considered for the ranking, which is also kind of like something that people need to take into consideration. You know, not playing in tournaments like the Home Sweet Homes, right? But in any way, I think the biggest thing that the Electronic conversation comes down to is, first of all, kind of like the first half of the year and the online versus LAN discussion, which I think a lot of people, if you kind of want to look at how that compares, obviously, like we had online tournaments only for 8 months out of the year, and we can't really look at it and say, well, this just doesn't matter as much as the LAN. Well, we can. Because we did kind of like the way that we look at it is just order the events by importance. And obviously the ones that are at the top, all of them are the LAN ones. Like the 5 out of the 6 late events, we can actually show that. I think we have a graphic for like
we got a sneak peek and something that is coming a bit later.
Coming in minutes. Can we have the Ax1Le versus Electronic graphic if we could, everybody? We can show the people at home exactly what you're talking about there. This is the one.
Yeah. Right. Like, I mean, already, if you look at it, kind of like the overall rating, like that's already a reasonable gap, right? But in general, I think Electronic just kind of lost out on the beginning of the year, because it was not just his overall stats. He was still relatively consistent. He just wasn't at the same level that we were used to him from the previous year, or even from the end of this year, where he kind of came back to the standards that we were used to from him, right? And that kind of hurt him a lot. And obviously people think that because he was so amazing online, and I have to say that of course he was, but we can't ignore 8 months out of the year. And we also have to take into consideration that Ax1Le and Hobbit actually did perform online and were pretty much up there, even though maybe it was a slight drop off from the previous, but they were just entirely consistent from the beginning to end, and always kind of up there and even getting some awards, while Electronic just had that slow start. And I think that was a pretty big part, because basically like the only thing Electronic had over those couple of players was that he had higher peaks because he had that amazing major. He had a couple of LAN tournaments at the end of the year that where he was just basically like among the top 3 players of the tournament. Yeah. So I mean, that's what he basically had over them, but everything else they were just pretty much ahead.
Yeah, but I mean, just in terms of LANs in general, like we considered 27 events in total, like ranked from like the highest to the lowest.
Yeah.
And out of that, there was like 5 or 6 LANs. So there just simply wasn't that many LANs as it seems. If you look at it from the year perspective, you think like, oh, the second half of the year was LANs, but it's actually Cologne, and then nothing.
Back to online.
Then like IMCIS wasn't the LAN, right? And then
Pro League wasn't a LAN.
Pro League wasn't a LAN, so you only had a couple of LANs at the end of the year. So you can't really just disregard everything that happened before.
I thought you were going to take the community stance here. You were going to be the forums, and he was going to be the reply.
No, I don't know. I saw a lot. I mean, I think another thing to mention is just like not every position is equally far away from the next one, right?
Sure.
Like between Ax1Le, who was 5th, right, and then Electronic, who was 7th. It's not the same difference between like Electronic and 8th was Yakinder, right? These guys are like closer together, and there's like this finer details that decided the difference. So you can't really, you can look at just the number and see like, oh, this guy is like 12th, this guy is like 8th, so it's not the same, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go back to the graphic, which is a little sneak peek of, because you were talking, Prof, about how it's difficult when you're defining just the top 20, because there are going to be players that just shyly miss out of that top 20 spot. I believe you had 3 that you wanted to just
we have the 3 players that missed out.
Is this the order?
This is the order.
So Frozen 21?
Frozen 21, Tessis 22, and then Mir would be 23. But this is like, yes, official, but unofficial, right? If you're not in the top 20, doesn't matter, kind of, yeah. You can have the honorable mention, and that's kind of it. Like, Frozen was the player, like, I think Frozen was the player that was most mentioned in the first, like, 10 weeks when we got to, like, number 20. It's like, where is Frozen? So Frozen's not making it in, scammed, robbed, and everything. But, yeah, I mean, the thing about Frozen is he had a great end to the year in terms of, like, the major, and he had a good EPL. But he has the mouse problem, which is they didn't get deep anywhere. He had 3 big matches, so that's like playoff matches or like similar status, depending on the tournament. We kind of not really redefined, but if you have a flashpoint, which is just a double elimination bracket, you can't use that as everything being the playoff, right? You need to find where the most important matches are, and that's what we call a big match, right?
Okay.
So that's one of his kind of problems. Yeah, he had a good rating in general. Like he's had a great year overall. But yeah, the competition is kind of tough.
Yeah, and the fact that when we're talking about Flashpoint 3 as well, that was an RMR, so no CIS teams in attendance there as well. You kind of have to take that at that point in time as well with a little bit of pinch of salt as well.
Yeah, and I mean even Robs, even though he wasn't the MVP, he was very close in terms of his performance at that event. So it's not like this guy has an MVP, so he's 5 times better than the EVP of the tournament. If they were very close, we look at it as, this is a very close thing. Frozen has a bit of an edge, but it's not the end of the world. It's not like he is 10 times better than Rob, so he has to be in the top 20, and Rob's can't, right?
Sure. Right. What about Tessis? Like, that's pretty surprising, right? Like, obviously, there's disparity of ratings here.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. It's a huge difference between the teams that Tessis played in general and where he played. Like, Heroic had a lot of deep runs, had lands, like major playoffs and everything, so he had to play against much harder opposition than Frozen and Mir especially, right? So that's why even with a 108 rating, he's closer to someone like Brokey, who had like a similar level, but also had more deeper runs, but just kind of fell off in the late part of the year. And I think some of the biggest events, like the elite events, that is where he didn't perform to the same level.
Yeah, you can see it just with the number of maps he's played as well.
Yeah.
Stats graph as well. I really like that we've got that for a little bit of context as well. Yeah. It's almost 50% of Frozen's topped on top of that as well.
Yeah, and also if you look at Mirrors, it's just like the disparity of where he played. I think that is a big detractor from his case. Basically, like it looks like he was amazing, like compared to the opposition. Like the 1.17 rating is like when you get to like way into the top 10, like top 7, it's 765, that kind of a number, you know. But obviously, like a lot of the year, he just didn't play at the biggest events. They didn't make it as far in those big events. They basically played Katowice and then kind of disappeared for a long time. So that was the problem.
Out of the players that we consider like the top 100, the Spirit guys had the lowest average opposition like ranking.
Oh. Yeah.
So that is something that just comes into mind. Like that is why you can have a 1.17 and not make it through.
I know, like. Is Mir a free agent at the moment?
I think he's benched. Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty sure, yeah. Transfer listed, benched.
It's so
something
crazy
like
because that team, you looked at it, Mir, Dexter, Magix, like it had a lot of skill in it, and unfortunately they kept disappointing, right?
I mean, even this whole transfer period, Mir wasn't the name that really popped up a lot, except on my Twitter, I think.
Yeah.
So that's essentially all the traction.
He's a big Mir fan too.
All the traction.
Do you remember the 6-man roster attempt from them as well? The fact that they subbed out their IGL, because they were subbing out everybody. They were subbing out Shocker as well. It was so weird. It was like on Overpass as well, of all the maps, just subbing out your IGL. Yeah, it was so odd. I think that was, a very weird take. They did I think it was a DreamHack Open maybe, so it wasn't the highest level of competition they were playing against, but they did look pretty decent when they were doing it, and then obviously the Valve ruling just made sure they couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah, I think like the weird thing with that 6-round rule is it never changed.
Yeah, that's the thing, like,
it never changed.
Yeah, I have to say that that's something that I've also kind of taken notice of. Everybody's like, well, we can't use the 6-man roster anymore because Valve made this rule. They didn't make the rule. They've already had the rule for a really long time. It's just kind of like we had that gap between RMRs that nobody really cared because the rule didn't exist in any other tournaments, in any other tournament organizer. Everybody kind of like accepted it as a part of the game now. So I think that was kind of an interesting way that people judged or justified that they had to make changes now because they can't use the 6-man roster anymore. We knew that was going to happen.
It's almost like living in Denmark for 20 years and then one day saying like, oh, the weather is shit, I need to move somewhere else. Like,
you knew that. Yeah.
Nothing new there.
Yeah. It was a weird one. It was pretty weird with all of that here. But like the top 20 up until this point, these 3 names, is there anybody that the people at home are going to be, well, they didn't even get a notable mention?
I think like people talk about Perfecto, and that's a player that's in a weird position because he's a very supportive player in a team that has like 3 amazing stars. So he doesn't get to shine as much, and it's very hard to like define where he fits into everything. There's a couple of more. I mean,
like
Nafany maybe. Like if we go back to the top 30, I'm sure that Peter will tweet out the extension of the list. So like stay tuned for that. I won't throw any names that I want to be.
I mean, one other name that I think people had on the tip of their tongues was Katie, and also that was another name that kind of like, you know, like a top 3 player of one of the standout teams of the year, basically. So that was also another name that got thrown out there.
Maybe just go back to the list quickly as well, if we could bring it up. I do just want to highlight some of maybe the differences, maybe some of the surprises from last year's list versus this year as well, because I think Device is probably one of those standout names that, you know, at the beginning of the year, you would have expected to be way higher up on that list.
I've got them side by side here. I actually did some notes. Who would have thought? Yeah, but like there's players that missed out as well, right? But these names, I was just looked at these after. This is quite interesting. Like this is the list for this year, but last year we had Breeze, JKS, Crims, Henny, Brolin, Magix, Sirison, and Dupree. Those are the names who are missing from this list. The rest of the names, they all appeared last year as well, just in varying different positions, right? So it's curious to see like how they moved around. Like Elige was like in the previous year he was 8th, and he was 19th, right? I think that tells you the story of these players.
Yeah, and I think Bit as well, super impressive, the fact that we're seeing him in his debut year coming into the top 10 as well. And the fact that he started off, it was at the tail end of 2020, but I remember that baptism by fire that he was subbing in for Flamey on Inferno against Astralis. Yeah, and it was just like, man, you couldn't give this kid a harder debut if you tried.
It was a disaster, right?
Yeah, it was a total disaster. The fact that we've seen him turn around as well, I think it's just really impressive to see from him.
Yeah, I mean, Bit definitely deserves like an honorary mention. Obviously, he made the list, so it's not like he needs one necessarily, but it's just kind of like the next closest thing we have to like a ZywOo guy who just like comes out of nowhere, you know, kind of like people are aware of him, but maybe ZywOo was a bit more on the radar even.
The Jedi Master.
The mutant or whatever else the Neo called him. But in general, I think even ZywOo was more on the radar than Bit was. If you think about like he was in FPL and he was kind of like destroying everybody there, but Bit was just in the Navi Junior, not even the highest rated player there, not even the highlight player in that team, and suddenly he goes into the main team, and within 3 months, I'm gonna say he just starts destroying everybody. That was crazy.
Well, you can see there are still 3 places that we are going to be crowning, and that is coming up after this break, so make sure you don't go anywhere as we're going to be going back up onto the stage to give out some awards. Welcome back, everybody, to the HLTV Awards, where it's now time to crown some champions, Chad. I'm very excited for this because we've got a lot of very good highlights, memories to be reliving.
Yeah, we got the medals there for the top 3. I think that's the closest to being a top player I've ever been, so that's exciting. But yeah, look, there's some awards to give away here this evening, which is exciting to do. I don't think I've ever been involved in anything quite like this before.
Yeah, no, this is kind of like the eSport, well, CSGO Oscars.
The CSGO Oscars.
We can, yeah, brand
steal
it
the
as
name?
that. Yeah, I don't think there's any trademark copyright on that at all. But we are going to be jumping into our first award, and it's going to be our Team of the Year. So let's take a look at what teams are up for contention.
Now the pressure starting to mount, high flashes in response, but Flames close the gap.
Oh, what? That from Shiro! A blind no-scope into the smoke, and he's got another. Just simple. And the flicks are there as well. Shiro, you're an animal.
And that's something Ax1Le needed info long, and it's cost him his life. Taking some initiative, taking some aggression.
No way, Nathany! How are you doing it? How does it look so easy? Times it to perfection. And simple sitting. No! Disaster! An absolute disaster!
And they've turned this into fights they can win, and Bit is so clean. The little headshot, the one tap, and he gets a follow-up as well. Okay, Bit.
Tag with the opener, jumping into the sight shots. Too many targets, not enough time, and Apex not.
Oh my goodness! 2-3 tags!
ZywOo, all that remains. And with 10 seconds left on the clock, he's going to prioritize plant. They're looking down, swarming all around him. He gets himself into a little bit of cover too. ZywOo, no way! The headshot's his! One final dance from Vitality!
Get to kind of relive some of those moments from some of those teams. The fact that we were just kind of prefacing it with our chat on the couches, those were some of the names that were really coming up as some of the highlights of the year.
Yeah, so Gambit, Na'Vi, Vitality, G2 being in the Major Grand Final and the Cologne Grand Final and not making it. Look, you can have a bit of a conversation there, but we do have this lovely little trophy here that we need to give out to our winner.
Yes, and I don't think there's any question of who's going to be taking this one, so let's hear it from the CEO.
Hey, HLTV, this is Navi CEO here. First of all, I want to thank you for this award. I won't say it was unexpected, but it was so long awaited, and it's great pleasure to finally get it. Guys, we've been in CS for a while, even forever, I guess. We've won different Tier 1 tournaments. We played all majors. We are only one team that never missed the major. We played several finals. We had periods of top 1 HLTV in our history. However, we've never been the real best team in the world, until now. This year was undoubtedly the best for the team and for the club in general. We won a lot of Tier 1 tournaments. We won the Grand Slam. We finally won the Major. And of course, we beat Akuma at the second Taramar. I want to congratulate and thank my boys for this year. They did an amazing job. The whole team, the players, including Flamey, who was with us at the beginning of the season, our genius coach, analyst, two psychologists, manager who joined Navi 8 years ago as a kid and was promoted to CSGO roster only a year ago. Not a bad start for the guy. It is also super important to mention the impact of the Academy project and everyone involved into Academy project, starting from Navi esports camp 3 years ago till now, when our Academy graduate became a major winner. This project also gave Carlos a real star player finally. In the end, I want to thank our staff, people that are giving all they have behind the scenes, marketing, media, merchandise, design, operations, like everyone. Guys, it's an honor to work with you. I love you all, and you're irreplaceable. Let's keep on doing things. I think we'll see you next year at the same ceremony. Bye, guys.
A huge congratulations to Na'Vi, not only for what they've achieved throughout the course of 2021, but for probably what is one of the best acceptance videos I've ever seen from an esports team.
You have to watch it a couple of times there to see all the little Easter eggs, because Harris Pilton absolutely nailed that one right there. I think Carlos might have some competition as far as the CEO banter goes, because that was great. I don't think there was any question, like you said, of Na'Vi being the #1 squad in the world, winning the major, right? Obviously the second half of the year, well, a bit more than the second half of the Intel Grand Slam in the mix there as well, winning the last event of the year, the World Finals for Blast there. So they've done it all, right? It's controversial to say, you know, the Na'Vi era, but they're definitely starting what could be the Na'Vi era if they continue where they left off in 2021.
Yeah, 100%. And going back to the major as well, the fact that they did it flawlessly, the first team that we have ever seen do that in Counter-Strike history as well. And then as Blade comes out saying, you know, I wasn't totally content with what the squad showed. So I'm sure 2022, that's going to continue to be there.
Yeah, I love the vibes that they're putting out, right? They're definitely humble, old Na'Vi, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, we can get into our next category, which is going to be the team highlights of the year. So we can take a look at who's up for grabs in that one.
1v4 with the P250.
I haven't heard of that. How does it go, Chad?
Well, it was a pretty important round. It was for the title.
He actually won it with just that P250. Yeah, I can't believe it.
Nobody was looking, and he managed to sneak his way all the way through the backlines here and shoot Shiro in the back of the head.
Right. And what did he do after that? That's nuts. So he actually shoots the AWP in the back of the head without anyone looking.
Gets the AWP and kills the guy CT.
Yeah. Oh my God, he's knifed him, and he's gotten away with the AWP. I'm starting to get nervous. There's no way. Kaden, you can't win Pro League like this. You can't win Pro League like this. No way. Ax1Le's left, 40 seconds and the bomb's on A. Take your time, son. You're about to make the play of your career. Oh my God, 30 seconds. Now, Ax1Le's on ramp. He's got 30 seconds to think this one through. A knife kill? You can't. Cadian, he's thinking about ramp.
Saw him.
Gets the info. He just has to hit this shot, and he's done it for Heroic. The leader, calling well above his years, clearing corners. Oh, no! You're an animal! Heroic have done it, and I just can't believe it. 40% of their team, only together since February.
Flashed off, drops Somali and Stewie here with the opener. They're trying to chase Fallen down, but Stewie's got his back. It's the beginning of the end, and it's all the AWPs. Cadian burnt out, can't find a thing. Stewie and Fallen making it happen. Make it Team Liquid be that semi-finalist. Refresh, as good as he's been, as much as he's given us. This is a Team Liquid victory, teed up. He's on for a third. Napfly dead as well. Refresh, how are you making this happen? Grim, the pit hero, the guy who's dug deep throughout this entire series to save that A-bomb site, has now got to come in clutch at B. Refresh on for the ace in a 1-on-5 clutch. He's looking to keep his legacy in check. This never should have happened. It should have never been this close. Grim, his heart's racing, his heart's beating, but Refresh can't find him. It's a guessing game. Stick on the bomb. Grim doesn't swing, he thinks it's a fake. Refresh with all 5, and we're going to over.
Man, watching all of those clips back, they still give me chills to this day. Some incredible highlights that we saw throughout 2021. You were there for one of them as well. You were commentating one. That must have been pretty insane to bear witness to.
Yeah, look, the Cadian one right there is nuts. I think that we spoke about it a little bit before, right? But then you have the refresh round as well. They had both of those happen within the same year from 2 different players. Like for Heroic right there to have like that. They show some entertaining Counter-Strike, don't they? You know, it's one of those things that can be pretty entertaining. But boys, Prof Striker, what do you think? Who do you think is going to take this one home? 3 big entries, 3 Danes. Who are we looking at?
Well, who we were looking at, we actually can see who we're looking at because he's here with us. Of course, it's not that big of a surprise. We've already kind of announced what the highlight of the year is. Hello, Casper. Nice to have you here. Well, let's just talk a little bit about the highlight itself. I mean, I think you even said that you didn't even aim to win it in the first place, right?
Yeah, I mean, starting out with that situation, I was thinking maybe I should just run, make the sound cue, get the round over with, not waste people's time. But I figured maybe just a little bit of a kill, you know, get that 1 kill closer to top 20, ranking. But yeah, so yeah, in the beginning I didn't really believe, and then I think it was more about maybe showing a bit of dominance, pulling out the knife. But when I hit that double wall bang on the Inters, I had a feeling that I could make something big.
Poor Inters. Tell me, like winning a clutch like this, having a highlight like this that we now are calling the highlight of the year, right? What is it? What does it feel like? Like
joy and the energy in that clip. And I mean, you guys know me. I've always been a bit of a showman, so to put that on in the final round of a big tournament, yeah, just pure joy.
Does it change the way that you like? Does it change you as a player when you win something like this? Like this is an unwinnable round. It's a P250, 1v4.
Yeah.
Like, does it change you?
I think maybe it makes you believe even more in some of the awkward situations and in the clutches where usually you're like there's no way. And I mean, I've definitely made some really good clutches happen as well, both in officials and practice since then. And also like when we just do the practice and I'm 1 against 4 with a pistol, like the opponents are even typing in the chat. And I remember like Simple, I think, screaming something at LAN when I had a P250 and a 1-on-4 or something as well, just like trolling a bit. So I think it maybe changes a bit also because for many years in my early stage of the career, I've had the reputation of maybe being a guy who couldn't do all the crazy stuff and have crazy stats. So when you do that, it removes some of that vision that people have. And yeah, I think the last 2 years has proven that me as an individual player can make these kind of things happen.
I mean, I have one more question. Obviously, we saw the refresh clutch as well, and that was something that obviously got the entry for the highlight of the year. Is there kind of like an internal banter between you two? Who has the better highlights? Is there like competition?
Yeah, when you like kind of announced the top 10, he made a tweet that he was coming for me, and next year I was not gonna win it. And I think, I mean, we talked about it as well, you and me, Prof, that we are a team where all 5 can make these kind of plays, and the ratings are quite equal. And I mean, there will always be a debate as well, which clutch was better and so forth. And I mean, it depends on what kind of parameters you judge them on, because obviously we versus 1 was completely amazing as well. I mean, I was kicking the banter and going nuts myself, and I can't believe it. But also I think it's quite fun that HLTV obviously completely biased with 3 Danish players. But I mean, basically people have for many years also talked about that, okay, Danish CS, there's like the team CS, we don't really have the individuals and so forth. And I guess with at least the top 3 being Danish players only, it also shows that Danish players can shoot some headshots and they can make some moves happen.
It's a highlight. You messaged me after. You messaged me after that highlight, mate. I think you're kind of happy with that one, weren't you? Congratulations.
Thank you, man.
Huge congrats, man.
Thank you.
Very well deserved.
Yeah, I mean, I texted you afterwards because I think, I mean, part of the reason why this play has probably also won the award is due to the casting of you and Alex. Yes, no, I honestly think so, because it makes it so much more iconic, and I'm all in for the banter and stuff with like the casting, which usually happens, especially in a situation like that. But just a little bit of a joke, I think it kind of kicksparked, and maybe I felt you guys a little bit in the clutch as well. So I really appreciate that. I think we have so much talent in the talent pool of Counter-Strike, so I appreciate you guys a lot, and yeah, thanks for making a lifetime memory.
Thank you for coming. It was an absolutely huge moment. Katie, and I just want to hand it over to you to say anything to the fans as well, everybody that's been supporting you throughout this year and was witnessing that moment. Yeah, thank you so much everyone for supporting Heroic throughout this year. Definitely been some ups and downs, and I think an entire book could be written about the things that has happened this year. We stayed united, and one of the few top teams who didn't change, and we want to make some great memories with you guys again next year, and appreciate all the support, and yeah, see you soon. Now, Katie, and you know that we're also going to be crowning our top 3 players, and I want to get it from your mouth first. So what kind of ranking are you having these 3 names in? Yeah, I think it's super difficult. Like, obviously, Simple is my number 1, and I think most people would put their money there. I think for the last 2 years, I actually was one of the few ones who was like, okay, ZywOo is better than Simple. But I have to say, this year there was no doubt for me when playing against the 2 that Simple did way more damage. In terms of who should be 2nd and 3rd, I think it's super difficult because NiKo has done things with a rifle in terms of rating and impact that I don't think we've seen that before. I mean, he played the AWP in the first half of the year with some struggles, but the last 6 months he's just been amazing. So I think potentially due to that reason I would put him higher, but I fully understand and respect ZywOo's position as number 2 if that's the case as well, because I mean Vitality also just did a crazy ass weird
last dance run in the end, right? Because if they didn't do that, I don't think he would be in contention, at least not for me. But with the title runs in the finals, there's a chance.
Yeah, no, we are going to be finding out very shortly indeed. Thank you so much, Kaden, for taking the time to join us. We are going to take a trip down memory lane as well to see who has been crowned #1 over the years of the HLTV rankings as well. We can start off with 2013, because that's where we saw Mr. Get Right. He opened up our show talking about his retirement or stepping back. But, you know, maybe if you're newer to the game, you might not realize the impact this legend has had on us.
Yeah, look, if you're newer to Counter-Strike, you wouldn't realize that Get Right in 1.6 is one of the absolute goats, and then coming into CSGO, just kicking things off in style with back-to-back #1s. Only a few players to do that. You had Olaf in the middle there, and coldzera another to get back-to-back #1s. Coming in after 2017, Simple, the big man himself, the #1 player in the world. And then this is where everything in Counter-Strike kind of got turned upside down. ZywOo came from, well, we don't want to say absolutely nowhere. I think some people knew he was on the horizon, but to come from obscurity, right, not being in a top team to back-to-back #1s in 2018 and 2019 is absolutely crazy.
Yeah, literally just coming from Face Games and then end to FPL.
And interviews
and then
with you.
That was, hell yeah, the iconic interview.
I was in that show, Matt.
Yes, you were. Yes.
I don't know if we won or not.
Team.
I think so.
I can't remember who
won.
I mean, were you with Bardolph or DDK? That would determine, you know.
DDK, we did face paint.
Yeah, that was it. You did the wall paint. Yeah, good stuff. Cool. Good stuff. Well, we are also going to take a quick recap in case you guys have missed out. We have got top 3 players in the contention of taking the title 1, 2, and 3. So let's take a quick look at some of their highlights over the year.
They're all going to come into action. Nice reaction. Oh, NiKo popping off. The only weapon in play.
Forcing a little bit further back. There's one of them. Oh, the follow-up as well. They're all over him. Grenades left and right. And he lands the 3rd headshot.
Oh, what a shot out of NiKo. No! He pulls the pistol out of absolutely nowhere. Nikola Kovac is here. Now Simple. Yeah. Oh, you always get Simple. Double up on the ladder.
Simple with the ult, got the first one more close up. Oh, of course he has that as well, and at a 3rd. That is spectacular. He's at the major and he's not wasting any time.
ZywOo, what can he even begin to do? There's that first kill found. Into the site he goes, ZywOo. And now a 1 versus 2 to try and find. Oh, ZywOo a 3rd. Oh, there it is.
Actively, they have to break this setup. I do not envy them. I mean, it's via Adamo. Freiburg proves it, only for a moment. Halzak trading.
No,
was that
triple kill? Oh, baby, a triple from the ZywOo.
We're back, ladies and gentlemen. We just wanted you to wait a little bit more to get into what I know you've all been waiting for, which is our top 3 players of the year.
And it wouldn't be a Counter-Strike event if we didn't have tech issues. I'm sure our viewers at home are more than familiar with having to wait. So the anticipation is probably boiling over right now.
Yes. Well, just to recap quickly, we do have ZywOo, Simple, and NiKo all in contention with this top 3 spot. So I think it's time to find out who is taking #3.
And NiKo playing from coffins. He was that 2nd rotated player. His head has appeared around the corner and he just swings out. That's a Ferrari peak and a half, and NiKo coming in with a follow-ups just cleans it up.
This man has been on an absolute tear of form throughout the latter half of 2021. An absolutely stunning performance in Stockholm, spearheading his team to that grand final of the major as well. Just a huge showing from NiKo towards the tail end of 2021.
Yeah, I think coming out of that player break, a man possessed, right? He's been in the top 20 every year since 2016, and now another #3, his 2nd #3. He had #2 in 2017, but yeah, absolute beast from him. And on that rifle, right, he's now put his name back in the conversation in the absolute elite, right? He's back in that conversation, and nobody can doubt that at all.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It was the adaptability that we had to see from NiKo. We're going back to sort of the beginning of the year where there were a lot of, I guess, troubles on the side of G2 as well. The fact that he can bounce back and then come back onto LAN as well, we know that's exactly where his heart lies.
Yeah, lots of woes there within the roster as well, and still performing at that level. So excited to see what him and the new roster have in store for us in 2022.
Very exciting stuff. And we do have NiKo on the line, I believe, to check in with after that win of taking the #3 spot. First of all, huge congratulations, NiKo.
Hey guys, thank you so much.
I just want to get an overall sentiment of how you're feeling coming into the tail end of 2021, because we saw you going absolutely lights out in terms of those stats. Can you put any words to how you managed to do that?
I don't know really, like as soon as I got back from break or as soon as we started going back to LAN, I just felt more comfortable. I had more fun playing. Like going back to LAN like brought a lot of good things to me back. So I think that's the biggest reason why I started to play so good. I'm not so proud of my performance at the start of the year. I think I could have and I should have done better to help my team as well. But I'm really happy about the last 6 months, for example. And I think the only reason why I did so good is just because we got back to LAN. My motivation went up again, and I just found myself again. Ever since we got back to LAN, I just kept improving and growing as a player. And obviously, my team helped me a lot to make me feel as comfortable as possible in the team. And they're also one of the biggest reasons why I put up such a performance.
Now, NiKo, look, you've got a lot of AWP abusers around you, right? Shiro, number 4. You're going to have the next 2 above you, AWP abusers as well, mate. Do you think that you can be the number 1 player in the world without the big green in your hands?
I don't know if I can, honestly. Like, I played probably the best CS of my career past 6 months, and, you know, they still did better than me. So I have to push myself even more, and I have to improve even more if I want to do better than them, basically. So I think I have a chance if I start the year from where I left off the last one. I think I can do better, but yeah, I will do my best, and they are probably the only reason why they're pushing me so much to do better and better.
NiKo, I just wanted to give you the floor for a moment to say anything to the viewers at home that have been supporting you along this journey throughout your entire career as well. Anything you want to say to them?
I guess it's the classic one. Just thank you guys for the support. Really, it means a lot. The biggest support that I really felt was throughout the major, throughout the playoff. I have never felt so many positive vibes coming from you, even though we failed to lift the trophy, to lift the major trophy, and I failed this shot against Simple, but I never felt such a support behind my back. And I want to just thank you all for the support throughout the whole year, basically. And I can promise you that we will start lifting trophies very soon, and it's our goal, and we will do everything that we can to do it, and we won't stop working until we do it.
Well, I'm super excited to see what the team's going to be delivering throughout 2022 as well. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us, NiKo. And yeah, and huge congratulations on getting number 3.
Thank you.
And that's what's so exciting going forward as well. The fact that we're coming into a new season. We know that there's been roster changes awry on the side of G2. I don't know. I'm believing what NiKo's saying there. The fact that we're going to be seeing more of them. We're going to be seeing high placings.
That sentiment, though, you know, picking up where he left off from 2021 into 2022, like if he can hit the ground running there, then there's definitely a conversation for him being higher in the rankings, right? And I'm obviously joking about the AWP abuser. We know that AWP is the most powerful gun in the game, and we know that the players who use it are super, super skilled. But his rifle work, like best rifler in the world, right? No argument. There can't be an argument made for that right now because everybody else around him this high up in the rankings are AWPers. Well,
a huge congratulations to NiKo for taking that number 3 spot. But now it's time to see who's taken number 2.
ZywOo's fast on the blink. ZywOo doesn't see the bank plan, but he's certainly close. Poking his head out in the toilet. ZywOo trades. Another clutch, maybe. ZywOo on the site. And now ZywOo dancing left and right. He's got to pick his shot wisely. He's only got one chance.
Oh my goodness!
Absolute dominance from ZywOo throughout 2021. Number 1 in the world in 2019, number 1 in the world in 2020. Sure, falling slightly shy of that, down to number 2, but that's still an incredible achievement from a player that we just really didn't know much about when he came into this top tier of Counter-Strike, now getting number 2 in the world.
He set himself the bar pretty high, didn't he? You know, the first 2 years in professional Counter-Strike, going to be the number 1 player in the world, and now to have that consistency to come in second this year with the woes around his team. Halfway through the year, they knew that they were changing roster, right? So you look at that, you look at ZywOo, it's a player that I definitely need to give some more praise here because this guy is an absolute animal. There's 2 players like him, right? There's 2 that have intuition and game sense, and it feels like they're in the matrix, as it were, and ZywOo is one of those absolute animals. They're just an absolute beast.
Yeah, huge showings from him throughout 2021. I'm very excited for this moment as well, because I haven't spoken to ZywOo on a broadcast since that infamous Face It major show match in 2018. So let's bring ZywOo up for a few words after being crowned our number 2 player in the world in 2021. First of all, huge congratulations, man. How are you feeling?
I feel great, thank you. I remember this Face It major. I remember these interviews.
Yeah, it was a good time.
Yeah,
hopefully we'll get some more in real life in 2022 as well.
Yeah. Actually, yeah, I'm gonna back to I feel great. Like, I play good CS, like overall, or I mean, I don't know really what to say, and I don't know. I'm too stressed right now. Like actually.
ZywOo, I got a question for you, mate. This year, are we going to see you return to the #1 player in the year?
Yes.
Yes?
Oh, no, I'm not gonna say yes because we play against really strong player every years coming up. So I'm not gonna say yes or I'm gonna be the first one or simple or whatever. Just gonna play my own game. Let's see what's gonna happen this year, and that's it. Like I'm not gonna think over or like overthinking or something like this.
Well,
I'm just gonna play my own CS and let's see.
A huge achievement nonetheless, ZywOo. I just want to give you the floor as well to say anything to the fans that have been supporting yourself and Vitality throughout 21.
I want to thank you for everybody for sure. I was really happy to see everyone in arena like with every power, everything like to give us. Like it was really cool for sure. And I want to thank Vitality, my family, Prodigy, my teammates, everybody, and thanks everyone.
Well, it was an absolutely fantastic showing from you, ZywOo. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. And yeah,
Thank
congratulations on getting #2.
Thank you very much.
Great to get to check in with ZywOo as well. You know, English improving as well. Obviously, the new roster. That's going to be an exciting thing to bear witness to. How that's going to be gelling.
I tried to test him when I saw him at the major. Right, we were in the lift and I'd heard the rumors about the team and stuff. Actually, maybe it was IEM Winter. I tried to test him. Like I asked a question to try and get a bit of English out of him. And he actually hit me with the classic "I don't know," right? And but I think the thing is, right, that there is great for a lot of the fans at home to see, especially Vitality fans, because now we know they have to communicate in English. If he can continue the ZywOo level form in his first 3 years of professional Counter-Strike, like if that level of consistency stays, that is just absurd levels of consistency out of somebody who's just class as a player.
Yeah, absolutely huge stuff from him. But we have one more giant to be crowning. I don't think there's any question who is taking the #1 in the world in 2021, so let's see.
Simple knows, and Simple's quicker. Keep your eyes on Perfecto, and Simple plucks Jax from the pack. It's a hard clear. The big five there, and straight through the corner. 3, 4 from Simple.
It really only could be one man to be claiming the title this year. The CSGO GOAT managing to claim his first major title as well. We spoke about it earlier in flawless fashion. We've never seen a team do it like that. And the impact that Simple is having throughout the year as well, even when the team weren't getting such great results, just an absolute masterclass from him.
Yeah, he's a monster. I think people at home, if they've watched any games of Simple's that I'm casting up, I'm a fanboy of Simple, right? He's just a phenomenon. This guy is absurd as a player, and I love watching him play. He makes all these moments exciting. So to see him get that #1 title back after 2 years where he's been, I guess, pushed on down to #2, I'm sure he's going to be happy with that.
Yeah, we are going to get a few words from him as well, as we do have Simple on the line after being crowned the HLTV #1 player of 2021. First of all, Simple, how does it feel to be back at the top, man?
Unexpected and dropped.
Ratioed and fell off?
Just kidding, it feels great. It feels great. It was a big achievement for me because I actually was #1 in 2018. And it was 3 or even 4 years ago. 3 years ago, yeah. So it's a great feeling, you know, when you can always come back, and only thankfully to my team, because without them, like in 2018, it wouldn't happen.
Simple, you're the best player in the world right now. There's no question about that. Your team is the best team in the world. You're the reigning major champions. You're the reigning major MVP. There is a massive target on your back and your team's back right now. And there has just been roster mania. Everybody changing rosters, trying to get the next big thing to beat you and your team. Which of those rosters, we've got the Astralis change, we've obviously got the change going over there with G2. Which of these names, Vitality as well, which of these names do you want to face the most?
I want to face G2 because finally they have good offer. And yeah, it's going to be fun to play against this team. I mean, of course, I expect to win some trophies, but I have my team behind myself, you know. And I believe in them more than G2 believe in each other.
Simple, when I spoke to you after the World Finals as well at Blast just a month ago, you were saying, you know, there's a lot to thank the fans for your achievements as well throughout this year. So I just wanted to give you some space, you know, to say anything to those viewers that have been following you throughout this year.
Yeah, just thank you everyone for support, and thank you everyone for supporting my team and organization. I mean, it means a lot when we have and we see so many people around the world who cheer for Navi, and I'm glad that this year was the best year for Natus Windsor, and hopefully we'll continue our streak and our domination for next year.
Well, thank you, Simple, for continuing to grace our screens with some glorious Counter-Strike as well. And huge congratulations for taking the #1 spot this year. And that's what I think is so incredible when we're speaking about Simple. The fact that he got 8 MVPs this year alone, just on the tail end as well. He was just absolutely scooping them up. And yet another trophy going to his cabinet that I'm sure is nicely polished by now.
Yeah, look, you've seen the trophy cabinet in the Navi office, right? That's full. He's going to have just as many accolades, I think. So it's crazy to see. But this is the thing. I think there was no doubt this year that Simple was the best player in the world, right? Yeah. I think everybody at home talking about this knew that he was #1. The big conversation was about 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5, right? There's been a few controversial decisions. We touched on a couple, but maybe we should touch on a couple more because we've got all the awards out there. Let's head the boys back on the couch and talk about what we just did. Lads, do you have some explaining to do again? That NiKo, the whole NiKo in 3rd, ZywOo 2nd. Do you want to start, I don't know, making the excuses now?
Actually, almost kind of surprised how much people even thought NiKo could be 2nd in this year. I think overall, when you look at the year, of course, NiKo was amazing in the last quarter. I'd say that was the time when he really shined. And there's always some recency bias because we're human, right? And the average viewer is not going to go back and look through all of the stats, all of the tournaments, rewatch stuff. You just your brain remembers the most recent stuff, and then that's how it rolls, right? But yeah, I think overall ZywOo just had a better year consistently from start to finish. And yeah, I mean, we can even pull off some stats. There is a graph that kind of shows each quarter how the top 3 performed, and that can maybe explain some of the things because now when you look at it, I mean, the first 2 quarters when you look at NiKo compared to the other 2 giants almost on the screen, I think things become quite clear.
That's the difference, right? And NiKo touched on that as well.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, if you look at kind of the quarter 3, quarter 4, I think if we only have looked at the latter half of the year and just kind of consider that the entire year, I think there was actually a discussion if NiKo couldn't be #2 actually, because that's just the level he put in. It was actually kind of Simple ZywOo, the normal Simple ZywOo, normal Simple and ZywOo level, not the Simple that we saw at the major in Cologne, where basically peak performance is almost of all time. But ZywOo, not NiKo was actually on par with those 2 in the latter half of the year. So I think that's impressive. But obviously, it's the first half that detracted from him.
Now, look, I asked it as a bit of a joke, right? The whole AWP abuse of the HLTV forum, everyone has fun with that stuff, right? But realistically speaking, NiKo, the whole dialogue at the start of the year was he was going to AWP, right?
Yeah.
Remember? He was going to AWP, and we were going to see how that went. And obviously, it didn't pan out the way they wanted. They had to make some changes. But the team in the patch that we see here was when we were well, does this roster make sense? Do they have to make some changes? And I think that could have even been when they decided as a team that there may be changes in the future, because the roles just didn't make sense.
Yeah.
And then you see NiKo come out and embrace what he does best. In that major grand final, NiKo running outside with an AK-47 on Nuke and finding opening kills, he was just manufacturing chances for the team.
Constantly dangerous.
Yeah, and then you look at the way that the motivation, he said the motivation came back, getting back on land, all those positives right there. They have to start the year in the online environment, right? Yeah. But as we trickle forward, hopefully we can find more of that, because if we can have these 3 playing the tail end of the year type of Counter-Strike, that's great. The more names that we can add into this mix, the more crazy things we're going to get to see on our screens. But you bang on with the conversation there. I think just the difference, a bar graph like this is great, right? It's hard to argue with this in front of your face.
Yeah. We were almost considering putting this up before we actually make the revelation, but I did say it looks a little bit too spoily to me. It's kind of it makes it so overwhelmingly obvious, what's going to happen in the top 3. I think it's more the number 3, number 4 was actually also a discussion with Shiro and NiKo, and I guess we can touch on that as well. I think the biggest factor going NiKo's way is kind of how much him, Simple, and ZywOo were ahead in terms of their impact on the team's wins, because that's also something that it's a bit difficult to show in stats, but there is a stats where it's kind of rating in wins, in round victories, where those 3 were just miles ahead of the competition. And Shiro was kind of on the same level as Hobbit and Exile in that. So Gambit were very much a trio of people who were kind of always kind of back and forth about who's going to carry the series, while NiKo was obviously the main power behind G2, and obviously they had a bunch of success thanks to that. And there was a lot of the time it was basically him manufacturing, like you were saying, chances for them, because he was just that kind of a player. The opening kills for sure. that's just the impact that you could see from NiKo, especially in the latter
I think we
half.
have a graphic for like Shiro versus NiKo.
Okay.
If we can bring that up, there's the first one, which is like the obvious thing that people look at and why a lot of people thought that Shiro would be the favorite to claim number 3, and even I think in bookmakers he had a massive lead in terms of the odds that people bet on this for some reason, which is kind of ridiculous to me. But yeah, you look at the top 3 placings, you look at the overall rating, maps, everything's in Shiro's favor. But then the second statistic that we have, like the second picture, shows some of these other stats that kind of come into discussion, and where NiKo kind of leads, right, Striker?
Yeah, I think the impact is one that I was just talking about. You know, not just on the round wins, which is not necessarily incorporated in the impact statistic. That's more like opening kills, multi-kills, and clutches. And obviously Nico's opening kills and multi-kills, like that's really his forte, right? Not necessarily clutches, that's more Shiro, where his position is. Obviously he's more passive and he's not going to be as involved in the openers, but he is going to be the guy who clutches. But anyway, you can see that, especially in the elite events rating, that's a pretty big difference.
And versus top 5.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the elite events is something that needs to be said, especially because of NiKo really had higher peaks than Shiro throughout the year. Like we could see it at the major, especially. Like he just had, even though Shiro has those 3 MVPs, they were just from relatively smaller events, and they weren't as overwhelming as maybe NiKo's like EVP performance from the major, where he was almost on par. With like a simple, you know, that kind of a conversation.
Yeah.
So
I mean, the conversation was there, like, is NiKo in better form than simple? Not is NiKo a better player? Not the whole year, but at this moment, at this tournament.
Yes.
Like for these couple of last events, we almost saw that, and there was that discussion. I think Simple kind of laughed it off in the end with a couple of more MVPs in his pocket.
I think here, right, one of the things that people need to consider as well is, like, this is Shiro's first year at this level of Counter-Strike as well, right? And I'm not saying that should detract from the level of performance. You put up a great performance throughout the year, right? But that's exciting, right? This is another name that if he gets more experience under his belt on LAN and shows that he can, you know, perform in those semifinals to grand finals on LAN with all those people in front of him, like, here's another name that we might just be finding in a conversation with the Simples and the ZywOos, right? If he can unlock that next level, because he's so young. Like, I remember years ago when that clip came out of him on Inferno, and like
Copenhagen Games, right?
Yeah, I think so. Like that was like, oh, okay, I see. We got something here, right? And we've got to see those moments. But I think you also get to see him in a pretty rigid Gambit system, right? And I think that if this team unlocks the flair of Ax1Le and Shiro on a consistent basis, I don't know how you do it. I don't have the answers. Groove probably does. That's where you maybe see them jump up with like the impact, because what we talk about with the Simples, with the ZywOos, with the NiKos, is when the chips are down, when they need somebody to pull something out of their ass, they do it. They do it. And if Shiro can become one of those players, like Counter-Strike is in such an exciting spot. We have so many good players now.
I mean, Shiro is 20, right? He's just building his legacy with the whole Gambit squad, essentially. These are players that a year and a half ago, and even some players, I mean, viewers that didn't watch during the online era, are like, who are these guys? And now we're having them, seeing them at big events, kind of getting their story and getting into them as players, right? And he's building his narrative as this like unkillable AWPer, right? He's not simple. Like when they came in, if you remember, like Gambit, it was like Mini, Simple, and Electronic. It was Ax1Le and Shiro. But after like 6 months, people realized that's bullshit. You can't even say that. He's completely different. It's kind of disrespectful even to say that, because it shows that you're not watching what's going on, right? And he's just someone that next year is going to be dangerous as well.
I have a question. Was Shiro on anybody's like bold predictions going into the year?
I don't think for this year. I don't think for this year, because they couldn't even put him. I think because he kind of fell out, because he came into the top 20 with Gambit at some point. I'm not sure, but a year or so before, he was on some bold predictions.
So some people expected it.
Yeah.
Some people are ready for it.
Yeah, this is actually something that what Prof mentioned at the end, kind of like being the unkillable guy, right? Like a lot of his, I think this is a bit more technical, but a lot of his rating is coming from like the survival part, you know, and just being valuable in that way. And as much as it is valuable to survive and just kind of like in the long run, right, like in terms of how the map plays out, it's still more valuable to be the guy on front who's just kind of like taking charge, you know, making those openings and just making those multi-kills and stuff like that. So that kind of also puts another level on the NiKo versus Shiro discussion, where NiKo is the guy who has just the more direct impact on a game, right? And you can see that specifically in the impact rating.
Just to close it off, just like, again, NiKo versus Shiro, if I'm not mistaken, that's also one of these hard decisions to make. That is like the Electronic versus Ax1Le versus Hobbit. That's a very small gap between these players and the smallest margin to decide. And in the end, like Shiro had an amazing year. You can say like he was robbed, but saying that someone is robbed because he finished 4th instead of 3rd is kind of ridiculous to me, I'd say. But yeah, I expect just more next year.
Well, you mentioned the bold predictions there, Chad. I believe we can start to talk about them from some of the players, because obviously you guys are asking the top 20 players who they're kind of looking forward to coming into the next year. We've got some of the common names that we've been seeing up there. I like that we've got Try up there as well, because I don't think anybody really thought of him until, what was it, Blast Showdown?
Oh, it's a Vitality series, right?
Yes, they
people
did
kind of
Vitality,
started
and that
talking
was
about him.
absolutely nuts. I mean, like, yeah, it was crazy to see the kind of impact that he had in the server as well, and such a young star as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's no surprise about m0NESY being on top of that list. I don't think everybody saw that coming. Like, he obviously just
Not
made
that bold
the
of a
step up.
prediction, is it?
Yeah, exactly. Like, there was almost a question whether we should just eliminate him from the options because of how obvious he is. But it would be unfair to him just because he
technically didn't play on a top 20 team, but he is now on a top 5 team. So it's kind of a gray area. It's just like
no, but he hasn't played until now on top 20 teams.
That's the
so
thing. We don't know how he's gonna play when he actually plays against Tier 1 opposition in Tier 1 tournaments alongside all of these players, right? Where he isn't just like this kid that's playing CS. He is expected to deliver. Win the next major if we were listening to G2 and their social media.
I'm curious with somebody like Xerxin in this situation, because he's in the academy team of MOUZ, right? So unless, I don't know, I don't want to talk about contracts and stuff here, but you know, we go down to the discussion of, is it going to be easy for him to make his way onto a team where he could be notable, right? Because MOUZ NXT are fortunately going to be capped by the fact that they are an academy team. So if he doesn't get an opportunity like Torzi or something like that, then maybe we won't get to see the best of him this year, but maybe next year.
But it feels like if he's really good, he can get a shot in MOUZ right now. With the roster they have, there are options. There's going to be possibility for him to make it through. Like if he is by far the best player on that team, and there's going to be some players on MOUZ that aren't going to be delivering, that's an obvious, like Abimas, NBK, if they can't fill in that role. And he actually got a lot of praise from the pro scene, not that much from stats and everything. He's not a player that shines that much in terms of stats. That's also interesting.
Okay. Fame we've seen a little bit of recently, haven't we?
Yeah.
K23.
Beat us for all.
Yeah, making it look easy. But that's one that people may have been able to look into. You mentioned Try. I'm actually excited for the 0-0 Nation roster.
Yes, definitely.
Like, no joke. Like having MOUZ in there with Try is actually pretty exciting. Yeah. And then it's VSM and Leo staying, right?
Yeah, that's supposed to be that.
Yeah, but look, I think VSM was the one who was meant to be like the next up and comer from Brazil. Unfortunately, that VAC ban kind of hoarded him. So having Try in the AVP, and then, well, other names that we do talk about, right? We've mentioned Deco before. Like MHL's just found himself in a better position. I think the most curious one for me right here is the Minus one, because if he can be good in the North American region, that's what you need. Like we need to start seeing who's going to be the next gen coming out.
Leash who picked him?
I think it was
NAF was MHL. No, NAF was MHL. So
I think it was
that. So I think it was Leash.
Minus should be playing in this like DAPS team. Is that the thing?
I think so.
So he's
that's a good mentor for him.
Yeah, amazing. I don't know much about him.
Yeah, same.
Chad, I wanted to ask you a question.
Okay.
You've been dishing out some of the questions.
Yeah.
Other than m0NESY, I think we're kind of just going to stop using him. Who would you be most excited for on this list, or is there somebody maybe that isn't on the list?
I think Torzi. Torzi, he's gotten a lot of hype over there within the academy roster, right? And it's the same conversation with the m0NESY situation, right? We have 2 players getting promoted to main teams. Well, not the main Na'Vi team, but a main roster, a main state team here. And now they get a chance to play against the big boys, right? Because something with this academy team that irks me a little bit is how these players get so much shine playing against teams that they're not the best players in the world.
Of course,
right?
not even close.
Yeah, and I want to see, right? Well, they're hyped up now, and unfortunately now they have a long way to fall. So we're going to give them the benefit of the doubt, especially from the expert panels and stuff, right? But I think the community could be quite harsh. And for these guys who are AWPers, there is a lot of onus put on them to perform almost immediately. Now, I know G2 haven't needed an AWPer to perform to like superstar level, but so they might be used to that, but they want to go in that direction. And MOUZ Sports, you saw the woes they had with Acor in the team. If Torzi can come in and be an adjustment on that, like I think that could be exciting for MOUZ, because it hasn't been fantastic for them since Dexter came in, if we're honest, and they've lost Rops. So not only do they have to fill the shoes of a fantastic rifler, they now need somebody to step on up with the AWP role, which they've been missing for some time. So yeah, Torzi, I think, is one that's exciting for me.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, a lot to get excited about heading into 2022 as well. I believe we can take a look at some of the events that we're going to be seeing gracing our screens too. I know a lot of TOs have been announcing what is coming up.
That's nice, isn't it?
2022. Yeah, getting a bit of a full calendar. That's really nice. I know. So obviously.
Oh, we have some stats.
Oh, no, we do have some more. Oh, there we go. Oh well. Yeah. Let's stay on these. Let's stay on these. Yeah.
Okay, so this is you were talking about the numbers.
Yeah.
Right.
So, you see the difference, right, between.
It's academy and then South American Counter-Strike.
Yeah, but much. Also you have to take into account, like with Exertion stats, that Mouse NXT played a lot outside of the Academy League. They were like top 20, like 22nd or something in the world at some point, playing all of these online cups. So they played against really good teams as well. So he couldn't really just farm stats, essentially.
Okay. So what are we expecting to happen to somebody like Monacy's numbers when we see him play for G2, right? Like, he plays in FPL and stuff, so he at least knows what it feels like to shoot the big boys.
And he's also not in the aggressive positions as well, or at least he's more on the passive side as an opera, and he obviously has a lot.
See how they look as a team, though.
Exactly, like they have a lot of aggression on that team, and I wonder how they're going to balance it out. But I feel like there's not going to be as much focus on Monacy thanks to that, because he's going to have the space. I don't think that's going to be an issue for him. So I think that's going to help him out in kind of like getting kickstarted a little bit into this team, even if there might be some issues about like who's going to take what position in terms of like. Some of these players, I think his is the one that's like 100% set. I don't have any questions about what Monacy is going to do in terms of positioning and what he's going to offer to this team. It's just about, is he going to be able to deliver at this level? I think the fact that he's going to have the space too is going to help him out.
Well, we're not going to have to wait too much longer to find out exactly how he does perform, because Blast coming up very shortly, indeed. If we take a look at the calendar. Sorry for queuing that a little bit early.
No, it's all right.
Yeah, we've got a hell of a lot of Counter-Strike coming up as well. And this is just the stuff that's announced too.
Yes.
Like there could be way more coming up as well.
Might not be 100% accurate, but this is like from what we know and
what's been announced.
Yeah,
so obviously we know that the major windows, right, maybe get shifted here or there depending on situations.
Whatever.
The RMRs we have to find in here, which will include all those big teams, and as you can see, it is just ESL and Blast here, right? So we don't know who's going to pop up with what type of tournament. I know that some of these TOs, they pencil it in, but you never know with some of them because we haven't seen certain TOs run tournaments in a while. But if you look at this here and you start the year with Blast's new format, right? We're going to get to see a lot of these new rosters, the ones that everybody at home wants to see, clashing against each other, and that gives us an idea of what type of Counter-Strike those teams are going to be bringing. Then we go into Katowice, and that's going to be a true test for so many teams, right? And then you go into that, Na'Vi is the favorite because they just ended the year as the best team in the world. They just, by their presence alone, forced all these other teams to make some roster changes, and now they go into that event, as the favorites. So I think that the start of the year is really exciting for those points.
Yeah, I would love to see things come full circle for Na'Vi, particularly as when the start of the pandemic, we saw them winning Katowice, saying, yep, the major made, that is theirs, this is Na'Vi's time to shine. Obviously, the online era happened, no majors. The fact that they bounced back, win that major, now we're sort of in, we were talking about whether it is a Na'Vi era, whether it's not a Na'Vi era.
It's a great debate.
Either way, coming into the beginning of 2022 and seeing them taking on Katowice, which potentially, we don't know whether it's confirmed to be in front of an audience or not. We'll see what happens with that situation. But that would be a really cool way to sort of restart everything.
Yeah.
And look, if you look at it this way, right, the Counter-Strike players are just getting back now, right? It was the 16th in which the player break officially ended. I think if people have been paying attention to the streams and stuff, there's been a lot of players. We've got Katie in here who's been doing a lot of streaming and stuff, right? There's a lot of players who are being active and playing Counter-Strike. So we're getting this like soft entry into players warming back into the year. We're going to get a couple of, let's call them warm-up events, right? You've got one going on right now, right? FunSpark Ulti is on right now, right?
Then there's obviously the Blast group. Then there's like a Pinnacle Winter Series that I think is still have some teams unannounced that are going to be like decent somewhere up top and who are going to be in Katowice. And then there's one more.
It's a DreamHack. It's not a DreamHack. There's no more DreamHack. It's the ESL Challenger event, right?
ESL
I think
Challenger,
Fury got announced there. I forget who the other. There was another.
Couple of, I think Complexity. No.
Maybe, there was one more notable name. I thought, oh, this field's actually all right for a challenger event.
There's also the relog tournaments, like all of the circuit that.
Well, that's
like
the FunSpark and
FunSpark, Elisa as well. There should be invitational, not invitational, but they're like big final that should be an arena event as well. Like some of these things that are kind of known, but they're not 100% where they are in the calendar, because at the end of the day, the big boys and the major dictates what happens when, and then they need to adjust to the
I think there's no doubt there's plenty of lead time as well into the major for everybody to be in form, right? Like I think that it's one of these things where ideally, I think if we had our way, it would be at the end of the seasons here. But it's not in a bad place when you consider that Pro League's going to be played, Blast is going to be played, and that's a lot of games, right? It's depending on the formats, depending on how things may get shaken up, but it's a lot of games. It's not like they just go and play. Say it was a Masters event and you play a best of 1 opener and a best of 3 and then that's it. We're going to see like a lot of games over that time for people to kind of work out where they are. So we should have a good indication going into the next major of who the big threats are. But this is what the start of the year is for me. It's learning. We're all learning together. Like the constellation of teams, who's in different positions, who's on form, who's been shunted right into a position where maybe they're going to perform worse now. There's all those questions. And the thing is, when this happens, when these roster changes happen, nobody knows. Like it's a new experience for everybody. Like the players who have been practicing and doing all this stuff at home, and like they're going to be confident in themselves, but nobody knows how all this stuff is going to mesh together when we get into live environment. And that is the coolest thing about the start of a season after a silly season. It's really exciting.
And it's very exciting how close the major is actually. Like already in May, and we'll have an RMR before that. Katowice is before that. Katowice is like next day. It's tomorrow essentially. That's how it feels. Like it's going to happen so fast. So.
We should have organized with Valve to announce the next major live on the show.
I mean, yeah, that would be amazing.
We dropped the ball
if they're listening.
Next year.
Well, that would be nice.
Send us a text message. We'll do it here. Pretty impromptu, but yeah, that's the thing. It has to get announced soon.
Yeah,
it has to be announced in the next couple of weeks.
Soon,
yeah.
Well, you mentioned the question marks of coming in off of the silly season, off of the player break as well. Anybody that you're particularly looking at coming into these Blast groups? Anybody you got your sort of
Vitality?
I mean,
Vitality
are two big ones for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, there's like the whole Group C of Blast is just new teams essentially. There's the new Liquid playing in that. I forget what the actual group is. I just know it's 4 teams who've changed lineups. So it's
EG as well.
EG's in there. Obviously, there's just so many new teams. Like it's going to be crazy to even keep track of like who's doing how well, because it's almost everybody's new. Almost every team's that's going to be in Blast group is just going to be different lineups, and obviously, like a lot of people will go based on that one result and kind of make judgments on teams, even though it's just a couple of series that they might
That's the
lose
best
or
part of
whatever
it,
like that.
especially of the best of ones. They have best of ones early on. That's going to be like
one
best of one. Vitality loses. Disband this team.
We're going to get the honeymoon phase as well, though, for a lot of teams, right? Like we're going to get to see who we overhyped at the start of the year when we come into the player break in the middle of the year and see how things actually start to simmer out. That's another thing. Like the Astralis roster change and the VP rosters change are still relatively new, all things considered. Obviously, they're not super new like the other ones, but they're still relatively new. So those teams will have had a bit of extra time. But the thing is, I have to agree, it can't not be Vitality and G2 as the discussion. It's the two. You've got NiKo, you've got ZywOo, and well, obviously we've got Simple, right? So that's the trifecta that hopefully we can carry forward this year. Heroic and Gambit are always exciting to watch, right? I can keep going on with the list. Like VP now excite people, so that's good too, right? We're getting into a point where the top 10 pool is starting to look strong again. Well, they play Counter-Strike now that
they changed, even though James says they're playing the same, but he's just like lying to us, like straight up lying.
They just view the game a bit differently to us, I suppose. To the eye test.
Maybe it's just James kind of like deludes himself in thinking they're playing the same game because the trio is always together and they're just like all the same. And there's the Flit on one side and Yakindar on the other, and they're just doing. I don't know what they're doing, but something's working. It's fine. So I think that's kind of like the mindset.
James like, VP. Let's play a default. Yakindar's in B side. Let's just rotate B now slowly.
It's lucky for him, I think. No,
it's
look,
empty.
It's an exciting year of Counter-Strike, right? Like we're obviously missing whatever other tournaments are going to pop up. We've all got a couple on right now, but it's going to be an exciting year of Counter-Strike. And I think as much as the woe is me, why won't Valve give us 128 tick? They hate the game. Valorant's killing us. Like realistically, from an objective standpoint, looking at it and looking at all the different tournaments that we have, looking at all the money that now exists in the pool, looking at everything around our game and our scene right now, as much as there are issues, there's always going to be issues, no matter what. Things can always be better. I think we're in a really good spot. Right? And I'm always the optimist around Counter-Strike. Like, I'm always like that. But I don't know. I've been doing this for a long time now. And to me, personally, things are only getting better. And the way that I watch things, the type of Counter-Strike I watch, it's only getting better. So I'm excited to see what this year has in store, because if it can be as good as last year, even without all the lands, right, then I'm amped.
Yeah, I mean, all you had to do was look at the viewership numbers for the major as well to see Counter-Strike certainly isn't dead. Well, I think that's all we have left and have time for the show.
It wouldn't be a confirmed episode with some positivity from Chad.
I haven't ranted, though.
True. You were getting there for a second.
Was that a micro rant?
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for having me, first of all. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope you guys enjoyed yourself. I know this is a big thing for you guys to be pulling off, you know, putting on an award show like this, and hopefully, continue for years to come.
Yeah, kind of amazing. Everything came together. There are a couple of technical difficulties. Who would have had like anything connected to esports without technical difficulties?
Exactly.
Especially, I mean, yeah, call-ins are difficult. So next year we can just have the players show up, and we won't have any issues with that. That's kind of the deal. That's the deal for Simple and the crew who had to wait for like 30 minutes to set them up.
We got a bit of a treat right coming up after this once we close it off. So the top 20 frag movie debut right here, right now.
Yeah, don't go anywhere, guys, because that is coming up very shortly. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much, guys, as well, for being here. And congratulations to all of our players. Yeah, thank you so much for tuning in, and stick around for that top 20 frag movie.